Hi, good morning, Giles, and welcome to the show.
Morning, Ward. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start in a place that I generally do. I think you've had one of the most well-rounded careers of execs that I tend to speak with. You know, it spans construction, operations, buy side and sell side of leasing. You know, mature orgs, startups, private and public companies. For anyone who doesn't know you, can you maybe talk us through that journey of your career and bring that forward to today and what you're doing right now?
Sure. Okay. It's a bit of a long story, so I hope you're sitting comfortably. Like a lot of people, sort of my generation in the data center industry, I sort of stumbled into it much by accident a very long time ago when it wasn't really cool or fashionable. So my journey began in 2000. I joined a company called Pihana Pacific, which were a startup actually based out of Honolulu, bizarrely. And we had got some funding and were building data centers around Asia Pac, which we did. Spent a year or two having a huge amount of fun building those first data centers, which were kind of the first generation of internet data centers getting built in APAC. And then that business was sold at the end of 2022 to Equinix. So that became the core of Equinix's Asian business. And a lot of those assets, or all those assets, are still going strong and are sort of some of the most significant carrier dense locations in Asia. So I was in construction at that point, then moved to operations and ran Equinix's Sydney operations for a few years. And then 2007, when we had recovered from the dot-com bubble, and were starting to construct again, moved up to Hong Kong with Equinix and ran construction for Asia Pac for a few years. Then in end of 2010, joined a company called PacNet, who are a big submarine cable operator across Asia, and built a data center business for them over the course of 5 years. And then we got a successful exit for those investors. That business was sold to Telstra. And then I changed tack and joined Amazon and spent a few years at Amazon and built their global data center leasing team, and were basically responsible for procuring data center capacity outside the US, which again was a huge learning experience and a lot of fun. At the start of 2000, I teamed up with US investor DigitalBridge, and we acquired some assets around Asia and set up a company which ultimately became Vantage Asia. And again, a lot of fun building that business, and then moved back to the US at the start of 2024, and then joined Goodman in the summer, the northern summer of 24, where I'm now responsible for business development for our global data center business, looking after our customers. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I had a lot of luck and got to work with some amazing people and do some quite amazing things and watch the data center industry move to front and center, really, where now it's in the press front page pretty much every day. There's a story about data centers. So it's been quite an exciting journey.
I think it's also fair to say that as well as the real breadth you've got in terms of the roles that you've held, I think that's equally matched by your like genuine global experience. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, and obviously from my accent, I grew up in UK. I actually emigrated to Australia at the end of the 90s. Took the first job I was offered, which was the Pihana Pacific role, which moved me to Singapore. So in fact, I passed my furniture, which was being shipped by sea from UK, and got to Singapore, and my furniture then arrived in Sydney, was in storage for a couple of years until I moved back. And then I've spent a good chunk of the last 25 years in Asia, which was where I did a lot of sort of my formative work in the early part of my career around Asia Pacific, which was a fantastic opportunity. It's there's such a wide range of cultures and work environments there. It's a very useful sort of basis for a career. Upon joining Amazon, and became more associated with the US, which is now where I live, which again has just given me exposure now to, I guess, 4 continents, working with people from around the world. Yeah, and again, just a remarkably lucky set of circumstances have given me the opportunity to live and work in so many countries.
Yeah, and I seem to remember you spend a bit of a chunk of time in the UK still as well, and I suppose that experience that you've got from a global point of view is really helpful now that you're with Goodman Group, given their global land and power portfolio. Can you maybe talk to me about how that's shaping your work with them today?
Goodman is, as you say, a global property developer. We have work here in the US, across UK and Europe, and across Asia. And we serve a set of essentially global customers, whether end users of data center capacity or data center operators, which again gives me a great opportunity to get around the world and spend time with the key buyers, engineers, and stakeholders in those businesses. So we spend quite a lot of time in UK, quite a lot of time in Sydney, which is our headquarters, and then time out here on the West Coast, meeting with customers, and then across Europe and Asia, where the customers sit.
Just going back to that breadth of your experience, that help me and some of the viewers understand, how you see that helping how you engage with the customers today.
I guess having been in various roles, I've got a sort of pretty unique lens, I guess, to look through, or set of lenses, perhaps is a better way to put it. So I've been on both sides of the contracting table, on the buy side and the sell side. I've been in construction, engineering roles and operation roles, so I can put myself in the shoes of the various people involved in the decisions around data center location, data center operator choice. And it's a very complicated sale. Obviously, it's a very long sales process. The buyers are very sophisticated, and there are a lot of different groups inside the buying organizations that get involved. So being able to put myself in their shoes and see the decision from their perspective, I think helps a lot in being able to sort of drive the conversations forward. And I think also, these decisions are being made for very long-term deployments. So it's very much a consultative process, making sure there's a good fit. And I think having those different lenses helps equip me with a better understanding of the customer.
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to a lot of those people who are buy side within the hyperscalers, and it's something I hear time and time again from them, in that they don't really want to be sold to. They want people like you who can act as trusted advisors and have been in their shoes and can understand some of their pain points and hopefully be able to help them solve some of those challenges. So completely get that. When we first started working with Goodman, one thing I was quite surprised about, I suppose, was just how much data center capacity they'd delivered. In fact, my pitch was that Goodman are the industry's best kept secret, having quietly gone about delivering around 600 megawatts of capacity over the last decade. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit about some of that, and what do you think kept Goodman under the radar, and how has that been changing in the last few years?
Yeah, I think that's true. Goodman's definitely the quiet achiever of the data center world. And it's longer than a decade, and it's more than 600 megawatts now. We delivered 3 more buildings over the summer, the northern summer. So I think it's now a bit north of 700. And it's kind of interesting, if I could tell a side story. I was in Hong Kong last week, and I got to go to Chun Wan on the west of the Kowloon Peninsula to a building, the Global Gateway building, which I first went to in 2000. Doing site selection for what became Equinix in Asia Pac. And that's now the building that Hong Kong 1 for Equinix is in. So I've kind of had an association with that building for 25 years. And in some ways, joining Goodman is sort of closing the loop, a big sort of career arc, in that Goodman acquired that building in 2005. So I've been working with Goodman for 20 years as we expanded in that building in the late noughties. I then built some other projects with Goodman in Australia, where obviously we're a significant landowner. And then in 2 more of the companies I've worked with across the last 15 years, I've been a customer of Goodman's in quite a considerable way. So I've kind of personally been involved in a chunk of that 700 megawatts that's been delivered over the last 20 years. And I think, as I say, the quiet achiever of the industry, Goodman's been quietly building some quite remarkable projects around the world. And anybody, for example, who knows the Tokyo data center world will know our Goodman Business Park at Inzai. There are 5 data centers there, gross power sort of north of 200 MVA. And I think that's a great example of Goodman's approach. That's a project probably from acquiring the land to finishing the last building, or handing over the last building, which we did in the summer. That's sort of 10-year exercise. And that's sort of illustrative of Goodman's vision, approach, and balance sheet strengths to be able to undertake projects of that scale and time.
I remember one of the first conversations I had with you after you joined the business. I think you said one of the first things that you did was go around and have a look at the asset portfolio. And I remember you saying it was even better than you anticipated before you joined. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit? You've already touched on it, but could you expand a little bit on that? And then also that you just touched on the fact that Goodman are a long-term patient investor. Can you maybe talk to us about those couple of points in a bit more detail?
The current, what we call power bank, so land with power attached to it that's in our ownership, is about 5 gigawatts. Of that, probably half the power is firm contract. And another half is in late stages where we've got high confidence that the contracts for power will be closed. And that's land that's all owned by Goodman. Infill sites that'll serve sort of zonal requirements for customers in major metros around the world. In Tokyo, we have a large-scale project. There's a 700 megawatt project, which we're just getting started on north of Tokyo. Similar scale to our Inzai development, which is now finished. So similar sort of scale to that, a lot more data centers in it, or a lot more power in it. So 700 megawatts in that market is quite remarkable. And again, that's something we've been working on for 2 or 3 years now. The civils are happening at the moment, and the first shell starts very soon. We have sites of a similar scale in Australia, in France, UK, and we're in sort of 18 metros on 4 continents with data centers. And just because of that history of ownership of industrial and logistics land, that's just aligned in most metros, aligned very well with where the data centers are. So it's just very, very neat symmetry. And yeah, some great projects that we're leaning into now and building. And it's great to see those projects getting built. Very exciting.
I think it's also fair to say another thing that's changed since you were brought into the business, and I assume a lot of that is being dictated by the conversations that you're having with customers. I think historically Goodman's been focused on powered shells, powered land, but you appointed Craig Knight into the business earlier this year. Craig came from Microsoft with a huge amount of experience in the operations space. So would seem as though you're heading in that direction as a business. Can you maybe help us understand what's driving that evolution?
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. Of the 700 megawatts plus that's been delivered, that's all been powered shells. So we've let that either to an end user who wants to fit it out themselves, or to a data center operator who will then fit that out and sort of break bulk to lease that out in smaller portions to customers. It's sort of a natural evolution of the industry that the requirements have become larger and larger. Particularly in the last sort of 2 to 3 years, there's been this step function, I think, in the size of a requirement that's coming out, where even sort of 2 years ago, you'd be talking to a customer, and if you had, say, a 32 megawatt shell, they might want to take 8 megawatts with a reserve for another 8. The conversation switched seemingly overnight to, well, if it's only 32 megawatts, it's a lot of effort for me to bring the network that all the way just for a 32 megawatt shell. So the buy size became very, very large. And I think that's resulted, so one influence is that's resulted in that breaking bulk probably not being so important anymore and not justifying an extra margin. So that's kind of a bit of pressure on the commercial side. And then also, I think there's been or is starting to be a change on the customer side. Not every end user wants to build everything in their portfolio anymore. And some of the markets we're in are quite challenging and probably not the easiest place to do development. So I think that's one of the strengths we bring is that we're comfortable working in a lot of markets where we've been for quite a lot of time, which are not terribly inviting to new entrants. So we bring a lot of value there. And I think it's natural for customers to now approach us and say, well, look, we need your capacity. We don't really want a third party standing between us and the building. So can you lean in and develop? So we're sort of getting this request from customers. Plus, I think there's also the commercial pressure that's arisen just because of the size of the projects now, the size of the buys that the end users are making.
You've talked about the 5 gigawatt global powered land portfolio. Can you maybe help us understand what we can expect to see from Goodman over the coming few years?
Well, you'll see a lot of that 5 gigawatt of project getting built. There are 6 projects getting started at the moment around the world. We will continue to expand on the 5 gigawatts. There's a lot more potential across our existing land holdings, and we continue to look for new opportunities. So, and as you mentioned, I think that one of the reasons I joined Goodman was just the extent and quality of that pipeline. And again, now being inside and being able to see what's beyond the 5 is really exciting. The industry over the last 2 to 3 years has just become really quite amazing. And so I think Goodman is going to play an oversized role in a lot of markets in making sure there's capacity available to fuel this tremendous growth that we're seeing and this AI revolution. Yeah, I think we're going to be a significant player, hopefully continue to have a lot of fun and watch the engineering really change in some of these deployments as the newer type of deployment comes along. It's really rejuvenating the industry. So again, very exciting to see and very happy to be a part of it. I'm very happy that Goodman's going to play a significant role.
Yeah, and I seem to remember the majority of that power bank is in Asia Pacific and Europe, but there is also an asset portfolio in North America too, and the business has brought in a very seasoned person from AWS in John Parsons. Are we likely to see more growth there in terms of assets as well?
Yeah, so John's very busy. I can't talk about much of what he's doing, but obviously the American market is very busy, touring the country, working on some opportunities. We have our first project in the US, the first shell in Los Angeles, which is the steel topped out, I think, about 4 weeks ago. So that project's well underway, bringing some much needed capacity to an exciting market in the US. And yeah, I just say watch this space. I think there are some exciting things coming.
I'll end on a question that I always do, which is what, in your opinion, are people in the industry not talking about or not talking about enough that you think that they should be?
I think there's 2 things colliding. One is, or converging. One is the scale of work that's now being done, and it's barely a day goes past without seeing another gigawatt campus announced somewhere, particularly here in the US. So I think there's a scale. The amount of data center that's being constructed now is just phenomenal. And I think that's converging with the data center environment is becoming much more complex. And I think much more labor intensive. It's historically data centers haven't had huge numbers of people involved with them once they're finished construction. But I think as we see a move to direct cooling, liquid to chip cooling, and a move to 800 volt DC distribution in the data center, which is what's coming, moves as changes in the data center are going to become a lot more complicated, because it's not going to be a question just unboxing something and plugging it in or rolling a rack into place. There's going to be a lot more work involved. I think it's going to require licensed tradespeople much more than has been historic. So I think there's going to be a general uplifting in skills, plus an expansion in the number of people that are involved in everything. Perhaps a third element is that the data center deployment is going to start changing much more frequently. I think the speed at which chips are evolving is much faster than anything we've seen. And it feels like almost the entire data center is going to be refitted on a sort of 5-year basis. And it's going to be significant changes. So I think they're going to become much busier, which just reinforces the challenge that we need to bring a lot more people into the industry, because we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
Always good to chat with you, Giles. Really appreciate you taking the time out to have the conversation today, and wish you and the wider team at Goodman all the best as you continue to build out the data center piece of the business.
Thanks, Ward. Lovely to chat as always, and thank you for your time. It's great to be here.